There are 6 screws and they can affect the 6 main keys on the saxophones.
I remember hearing it progress from being really slow with a metronome, about 30 BPM, to just being almost inaudibly fast, like a hummingbird's wings.
When we go to a concert in India, it starts at 7 at night and finishes at 7 in the morning. And one artist might play for 3 or 4 hours.
G'day, it's Nigel here. Welcome back to the Sax School Online podcast. This week, we're taking saxophone to a whole new dimension as Joel talks to the incredible saxophonist Jesse Bannister. Now, Jesse is a world-renowned performer and composer of Indian classical music. And in today's episode, Jesse breaks down a whole bunch of techniques that he's developed to incorporate saxophone into Indian music, including his tonguing, his amazing fingering techniques, plus even some physical adjustments he's done to his saxophone. It's really, really interesting. Just the way that he works out how to play a 22-note scale will blow your mind. So that's all coming up for you today. Just before we get started though, if you are enjoying the episodes, we've been working super hard on them for you. It'd really help us out though if you could share it maybe with just one other person. Just would help us to reach more friends like you. Thanks a bunch. Okay, let's dig into the episode.
Hi Jesse, and welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Hi, Joel. It's lovely to see you again.
Me and Jesse have known each other for a really long time. We've just been talking about it, and we've realised we've known each other for nearly 30 years, which is a very long time considering that we're in our early 30s. We wish. Have you been busy? How's life and playing and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I've been really busy this last week. I've just been on tour with a sitarist called Niladri Kumar, just playing in Leicester Y Theatre and at the weekend at Manchester Stoller Hall. So, and then just carrying on performing this week, which is great.
Brilliant. I mean, we've just said that we've known each other for 30 years, but we've took very different paths in our music. Well, there's a lot of crossover actually, and we'll get to that. But can you tell the listeners a little bit about your career so far and also why you picked this really specific avenue of music to explore on the saxophone?
So I started playing saxophone at age 16. That's when I started music. And I ended up going to music college at 18, 19 to study jazz. I was really fascinated with John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins. I was born in London, so I was really keen to play edgy music and modal music. And when I got to college, the environment was very different. The curriculum was very different. And I met an Indian music teacher called Dharambir Singh, and I was really inspired to learn Indian music. But prior to that, whilst I was raised by my father, my mother's Indian. So it was obviously something inside me that was driving me underneath to move towards studying and playing Indian music.
So when did you kind of make the decision to go full on in this direction? What was it? Was there a particular recording or was it just the experience of playing the music?
I think it was the opportunities that it was going to provide me in my career, because I wasn't at the level of the other jazz saxophonists around me. But with Indian music, I was being asked to do work. I was asked to play in ensembles and get involved in things. So it kind of gradually just evolved. It wasn't like a spark moment. But I would say going to India in 2000, which was 8 years into my journey, was probably that moment where I realised that I could do it, because I was performing on big stages with the best Indian musicians and they were really encouraging me.
So do you think it was really important that you went and immersed yourself in the actual culture and the music in the country the music was born in?
Yeah, India's a fabulous place. When we go to a concert in India, it starts at 7 at night and finishes at 7 in the morning. And one artist might play for 3 or 4 hours and they're only playing two pieces. So you really get a sense of the presentation of the music. In the West, Indian music is presented in 45-minute chunks. And originally in the West, actually on HMV, can you imagine condensing a 2-hour performance to 3 minutes? So there's been an evolution and a sort of backward evolution, as it were, in terms of Indian music traveling from east to west. But I would say, living in Leeds and having grown up in London, the multiculturalness of those cities has allowed me to learn and study Indian music actually in Leeds itself. So I've only done probably a total of 12 weeks study in India itself, but the rest over many years has been in Leeds.
Right, well, that must have been an amazing experience over there. Wow, that's a long gig, isn't it? That's a long gig.
Yeah,
I've done some gigs in my time, but I don't think I've done one that long, I have to say.
I mean, it really allows you to take your time with things. With Indian music, we slowly reveal the story. We don't sort of go straight into it. So that's the nice thing as a musician and an improviser, that we get the chance to tell a story over a period of time.
I think I'd quite enjoy that, actually.
I think you would. I mean, I think that's probably where Coltrane got this idea that he wanted to play these hugely long solos, and because he realized that he wanted to hit the depth of something. Like when we practice the saxophone, we practice non-stop for 2 or 3 hours, and we get to a point where it's really just starting to warm up and happen. So to have that opportunity in front of an audience is a blessing.
Yeah, amazing. So obviously you went to college and studied jazz, and you've mentioned Coltrane and other players that were influences to you when you were younger. So from the point of view of how Indian music works, I mean, is it improvised or is it notated, or is there kind of a structure, a bit like in jazz, a chord structure, or is something else going on? How is this developed, particularly over these really long concerts?
Yeah, so there's two aspects. There's melody and there's rhythm. Raga and tala. So raga means to color or to dye. So it's to color the imagination. So in a concert, if I was going to play a piece for, say, an hour, I would choose one raga. I would choose one main melodic structure, which would have 5, 6, 7, 8, or maybe 9 or 10 notes. And so that raga has starting and stopping points, which give a real color to the mood. So you're painting a picture. There's literally an idea that you're supposed to imbibe the essence or the feeling or the emotion of that particular melodic phrase or structure, and somehow through your instrument or your voice show the audience that this is a raga, which is almost like a living being. So structurally, raga has different forms within it, and the first form is called alap, which is the introduction of the notes. So the musician on their own with a drone would either sing or play those particular phrases or notes. And then after maybe half an hour, the artist would introduce the tabla player. So the tabla is the percussion instrument, and the tabla player plays in time cycles. So the tala or rhythm aspect is all time cycle. It's very similar to jazz or other song forms where there's a fixed time structure. So the most common one is 16 beats, which is 4 sets of 4, but you might play in 7, which is a 3 and a 4. So this idea of playing in odd meters, which is quite prevalent now in modern jazz, has come from Indian music, from the language. So the structure of 7 would be di, di, nak, din, din, na, na, which is 7 beats, or more simply takita, taka, dinna, takita, taka, dinna, which is more like 3.5. If you've got 7 and you've got 3.5, and then you'd have 1 3/4. So there's this real perception, mathematical perception of Dala with the feeling, and a mathematical perception of the raga, the melody, with the feeling as well. Because there is no harmonic structure, rhythm and melody have to be really detailed. So as a musician, it gives us an opportunity as a soloist to develop that rich detail.
That's really interesting. So there are a lot of parallels in some ways with jazz, and it's improvised. I suppose the Western equivalent maybe would be the modes to the ragas. Would you say that that's a good comparison? The different sounds. I did a video recently in Sat School, which was all about musical structures, Western musical structures, and the modes, and actually demonstrated all the modes with an Indian drone, actually, because, it really starts to capture the essence and the vibe of that particular sound. I didn't do it for 12 hours, but, it was a shorter video than that. But yeah, is it a kind of, would you say it's a similar thing? Obviously it's different, but from the point of view of they've all got their own sort of vibe and sound and that side of things?
Yeah, so the ragas definitely have the vibe and sound. So the difference is the scales or the modes, or what we call in Indian music the tat, is the starting point. So that would be the parent scale. So for example, if we were in C, so we might have a raga that's sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, which is the Dorian mode. And this raga, or this scale, in raga sense, there's at least 100 different ragas using these 7 notes. So one raga, which is an afternoon raga, sa ni sa ga ma pa ma pa ga ma ga re sa. Whereas an evening raga, a late evening raga, sa ma da ni da ma ga ma ga re sa. So just ever so slightly different inflections which create the mood of that particular raga. And in relation to the modes, Indian music and Greek music have the same origin. That at some point they shared musical knowledge through the modal system, and it went 2 different ways, essentially.
That was amazing. I love that. It sounded just beautiful sounds, and I can feel myself in India just listening to that. I love that. So do I understand correctly that there's some elements of some of these sounds, maybe ragas, that have slightly different tunings to the Western system?
Yeah, if you sort of add up all of the ragas, a simple way to see this is that there are 22 divisions of the octave. This is one scientific approach, but there are approaches which are non-scientific. So the most common system is the 22 Shruti system. Shruti means microtones. So, for example, the major point of reference is actually the 5th, which is a ratio of 3/2, which relates to the Pythagorean tuning, and also the major 3rd, which is 5/4. So the 5/4 major 3rd is a lot flatter than the equal tempered major 3rd. But also they have a sharper major 3rd as well. So the tonic and the 5th are fixed in Indian classical music. And then the other 10 notes have 2 positions, which give you 22 divisions of the octave. And of those positions, none of them relate to equal temperament.
Ah, interesting. Really interesting. So obviously the saxophone is an instrument built in equal temperament. So how do you go about getting these nuances and these 22 notes in the octave? Do you do that with your embouchure? Do you do it by pitching or bending? Or do you actually have to modify the instrument, or all of those things?
Yeah, there's 4 aspects actually. There's the instrument modification, there's the pitch bending with the embouchure, there's false fingering, and then there's sliding to get to where you want to go, which is actually teaches you where the pitch is. It's the sliding actually, which that's the key thing in the microtonalities. You can't say there's that note, there's that note, there's that note. Whilst there is, it's the way you approach it. You realize, oh, I've found that feeling there. It's when you arrive at a destination, oh, there's that feeling of that note.
So by sliding, do you mean slightly opening or closing tone holes, or do you mean actually just sliding the pitch by using kind of bending it or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it'd be best to demonstrate.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is a drone which makes sure I play in tune, and the drone happens to be tuned to C. So if I want to slide to the flat second, I just slowly, on this particular saxophone, which is a Mark 6, I just slowly open with the button B flat fingering. But obviously if I want to go from this saxophone B flat to the C sharp, so D flat concert to E natural, that's a lot harder because that's a bigger interval. So I'm using here a side C to assist that process, because as I start opening without it, there's a point where the sound stops. So by using this at the beginning, I can deal with that stopping of the sound. And at the moment you can hear it's not perfect. It's not a perfect slide. And obviously I can't slide across the break, so there are limitations. But in terms of the microtonality, I've added these little tuning screws. Dave Walker at All Brass and Woodwind added these for me.
So just to explain to the listeners, so these are just little screws, and what are they doing? Are they just changing the height of the keys, or?
Yeah, so if I take there are 6 screws, and they can affect the 6 main keys on the saxophone. So they don't affect the side keys. They affect the B, the A, the G, the F, the E, and the D. So if I show you on this B here, obviously I can still play it as a B flat, and it still acts in that way. I don't know if you can see. It's this one here.
Oh yeah, so you're just opening or tightening a little screw on there.
Yeah. And if I actually play and then open and tighten it, you'll see the difference. It's very subtle, but you can see the difference. It basically means if I'm playing, there's an evening raga called Purya Danashari, which has a much flatter flat second compared to other ragas. Like you wouldn't find that in Western music. It just makes it stick out in a particular way. And so that's really the only modification on the instrument. I'd say the modification was to me and my playing. I use a very soft reed. I use a 2.5 reed, and I like to play it for days on end to get the right softness. And obviously it's just a standard C-star ebonite mouthpiece. There's actually a saxophone technique that's been really helpful. I've been playing this raga where it goes to the bottom C, but obviously I don't have it on the alto. where you actually put your leg over, but because I'm sat cross-legged, it can be a little bit tricky at times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've seen people do a similar thing where they put the knee down the bell when they stood up to get the low A. Yeah,
exactly. And you can slide it. It does take a lot of effort, but the main thing is just practicing sliding patterns. And also the other modification is the way I'm actually using my fingers is very different to how a jazz saxophonist would do it. They're much more feather-like because I'm might be similar to how an Eastern sax player would play an instrument. And then there's another technique. The other techniques are particularly with the tongue. So there's a part of the raga called jala, which is like repeated notes. And that gets a lot faster to this point. So this I developed a technique. I was taught by Al Wood, actually. He taught me a marching band technique, which he didn't realize would be perfect for Indian music. And it's basically where you tongue two notes, you go up the mouthpiece and then down. And so you have a group of 4 notes. And then from there you can make different patterns. So with 3 would obviously be one tongue up, down.
I've come across that in some other concepts, sometimes called duden tonging, and sometimes just called it's just one of the varying types of double tonguing, I suppose, but not in the classical sense with the bridge in the mouth and stuff like that. It's very effective, isn't it? And very, very quick. It's great.
Yeah, I don't have to move my hands, and I'm just like... you don't have to do anything.
Brilliant. I think just our shared history. Do you remember she was a student at the Leeds Conservatoire called Saffron Beagley?
I do, yeah.
Do you remember Saffron?
I do.
Saffron, actually, did she have some lessons with you maybe at some point?
She did, yeah. And she went to India for 3 months.
She lived in one of the rooms in one of my old houses she rented,
really?
and she practiced that tonguing technique every day, relentlessly for an entire year, and she was blisteringly fast by the end of the year. I remember hearing it progress from being really slow with a metronome, about 30 BPM, to just being almost inaudibly fast, like a hummingbird's wings it was. It's a great technique. So it's really, really interesting sound.
When you first do it, you do have to do it very slow, and also bear in mind your tongue will bleed at the beginning. Not massively, but a little bit.
Well, that's a warning for you folks. Be careful with that double tonguing technique. So just for the listeners, if, maybe this was something that a player, a beginner or an intermediate player fancied getting into and investigating, what advice could you give them to get started with playing some Indian music, and what challenges might they face?
I think the first thing is to put a drone on. I started by going to the piano and just playing a C and a G and just banging it out, and then just really immersing myself in that tonic and fifth, and then just playing long notes over it. And then you'll find these shapes and sounds, very, very much so, because Indian music is experimental. It's an improvised form, and the idea is originally it was found in nature, where there was obviously the hum of the forest and someone's just singing and they're expressing the colours and the movement that's around them. So I would just be free and open with it. So if you're playing in a minor key, say you're playing in C minor, what does it really feel like to play that F sharp? And where does that F sharp belong in relation to the G? Where does it belong in relation to the E flat? And then you'll find these varying intervals that are in Indian music. But you can also take the standard Western major and the standard minors and really feel the vibration of the note. So our harmony is in note relationship, which we call tone. So the idea of tone is if I play na, so how that is a note, but na is a note, but together they're a tone. They form a tone, i.e., in the sense of they form a color. So when you're playing notes, what note am I starting on and what note am I finishing on? Okay, what about if I started on a different note but finished on the same note? So then you're making these tonal connections. And if you've got a drone going on, you're entering into a three-dimensional world, because you've got drone, you've got starting point, you've got ending point. So you've got these three moments, as it were. That would be a good way to do it. Another way, if you want to play like Coltrane in terms of his sheets of sound, is to take any particular scale and play as if you were drawing the Himalayas. So I'm going from this point to this point, or maybe I can go from to there. So I'm just seeing these pictures, these mountain peaks. So I'm not having to think about the notes individually. And I think because Coltrane had these lessons with Ravi Shankar and listened to a lot of Indian flute, he was able to grasp it very quickly in the way he wanted to, and use that as a nice tool as a jazz player. So you can play these huge sheets of sound, and when you're doing it, you can connect the notes, or you might go, okay, I've got 7 notes there. Why don't I miss one out? Or what shape does that make? Or let me miss this one out instead. So you're trying all of the combinations, and that was really why Coltrane got into this idea of searching on a few notes, basically. I think the challenge is boredom. I think the challenge of playing less notes is how much can you invigorate 3 notes? How long can you play 3 notes for? How long can you play a phrase that ends on the same note? And how interesting can you make that? So what I would say is to alleviate that boredom is to take an exercise where you play a phrase and you play that phrase back exactly the same, but it's improvised. You don't make it fixed. So then what you're doing is you're catching yourself up, and you kind of enter into this creative way of, oh, I'm playing these 3 notes, like da, da, da. Oh, I played that da, da, da. How can I change that? Da, da, da. So then, da, da, da. So you're making this amazing geometric pattern. Challenges, I think the challenge would be finding resources. With Indian music, there's very few resources. And I think that there's very little notated resources. I have made some myself. But if you listen to some indie music on YouTube, you'll be able to hear the music, but you won't find any particular notation that will satisfy you as a Western musician, I would say. But I would invest in some drones and then just play along to them.
Yeah, there's some really good websites that do drones, aren't there, and some good apps as well.
Yeah.
That are really, really useful for that kind of thing. I mean, everything you've just said, Jesse, is almost exactly the kind of thing I talk about just in jazz improvisation, about exploring sounds and restrictive notes things. So it's a very similar thing. And in fact, what you said towards the end about the not being a lot of resources, notated resources, it's just the same as jazz solos and trying to learn that style. So it's about transcription. I think a lot of things always come back to transcription. It's about listening and imitating and just finding the things you like and exploring the music that you enjoy playing.
Yeah, that's wonderful thought. Yeah, in Indian classical music, the main instrument is the voice, and what happens when there's a vocal performance, there'll be a harmonium player or a string player who copies exactly what they're doing. So they're transcribing live on the spot, which is an interesting thing. If you listen to any vocal Indian music, have a listen out for the echo.
Okay, interesting. I will check that out without a doubt. So what's coming up for you in the future? Have you got any tours or collaborations that you can tell our listeners about so they can check it out?
Yeah, I'm currently performing with Niladri Kumar. I'm playing at Leeds Howard Assembly Room. That's in May, so it may be after the podcast goes out. I'm due to go to India in December, January, and then there's going to be a tour, a national tour next year around March, April. And currently I'm finishing my PhD, which is about sympathetic resonance. I've basically taken a grand piano and retuned it, flipped it on its side, and play the saxophone into it, which creates sympathetic resonance. And I've recorded it, removed the saxophone, so you're just left with the string resonance, and that's going to come out as a recording as well.
Brilliant. Actually, that's something I love practicing. Love putting
Yeah.
a brick or my foot or whatever I've got handy on the sustain pedal on a piano and just playing arpeggios into it and just listening to it vibrate or scales and stuff. It's a lovely thing to do. It is just about exploring sound, isn't it? That's what we've been talking about as much as anything else today. You know, it's just that explorative mind of a musician just looking for sounds and looking for kind of beauty in music, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. It's been fascinating just hearing about your journey so far with Indian music and about all the things that go on and what make it sound like it sounds, you know. So I hope this has inspired some of our listeners to check some out and check you out. And I'd just like to say thank you for coming on the podcast this week.
Oh, thank you, Joel. And I hope the listeners got something out of it, and good luck to you all.
Wow, I really hope you enjoy that just as much as I did. Don't forget you can get the full transcription from today's episode over on our blog. That's at saxschoolonline.com/podcast. And if you're not yet a member of Sax School, well, you can go and grab a free 14-day trial, check out all the structured lessons and get help from our tutors. You'll be amazed at how much it can help move your playing ahead, whether you're just getting started on sax, coming back after a break, or even if you're looking for pro tips. It's all in there waiting for you, and that 14-day trial is free. But for now though, keep practicing hard and we'll see you next time.